Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to Carla Paiva Life Coach, and we have a very special guest here in the house. He's a friend of mine, and his name is Brian Crombie. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much.
So, Brian, can you, share with us and, the audience a little bit about yourself aside the business, just like a little bit of your personal, bringing?
Sure. So I have been doing a fair amount of speaking lately, and that's how we met, because I've been speaking on a topic of my doctoral thesis. So I'm doing a part-time doctorate in business at an interesting university in Paris, France, and my topic is social capital, and it's how you interact with people and establish authentic relationships that help you in life and in business. And I've got a talk that I do called Community and the Power of Co, and I go through 10 powers of Co that are the ways that you can be more successful in business and life and philanthropy and a whole bunch of other things. So that's one of the things that's keeping me the busiest these days. In addition, I'm chair of something called Transit Alliance, which is a civic organization in the Greater Toronto area that spurs transit investment. And we've got dinners that occur once a month with interesting speakers like the Mayor of Toronto, the Minister of Transportation, the Principal Secretary to the Cabinet, people like that. We have conferences and seminars about once every 2-3 months, and that's a fun, interesting philanthropic, social involvement that I have. And then I used to be the president of the Mississauga Arts Council, and that was a volunteer chair position, but I was therefore, out promoting the arts and having events and trying to get Mississauga artists better known and more gigs and into the business more.
So it's all like about events and exposure to, networking and kind of thing?
Well, for the Mississauga Arts Council, it clearly was, but that's also what my thesis topic is about, which is really how you get to know people and how you get out there and showing up in society so that you get to know people, establish relationships, and get some business out of it.
So when you talk about how to get to know people, share a little bit with us your experience in getting to know people when you're placed in these events.
Well, I've got a whole speech that's going to take me 45 minutes to do it. I've done a TEDx on it. I think that some of the powers of Co that I talk about are critical ways that one can exercise some of the things that they've got to do such that they end up becoming more successful in connecting to people. And so one of the things I talk about is that people don't realize that the weak connections are as important, if not more important, than the strong connections. And the academics call it bonding social capital and bridging social capital. So the bond would be very good friends, people that are in your functional area, people that you know really well, your families, etc. Friends that you've had for a long period of time. The bridging or the weaker connections would be people that you know like you, that I meet through somebody else. And it's interesting because when they do studies of people in banks, the people that have the majority of bridging connections, sort of those connections that someone might be called sort of not close friends but friends or associates, end up getting bigger bonuses, end up getting more raises. The real estate agents that have those kind of connections, the mortgage brokers, they all end up being more successful, particularly if they've got those connections to people that are called the super connectors, so the people that connect with a whole wide range of other people. And then it's interesting, people get promotions, ideas, new jobs, and even dates or mates from those kinds of connections, because the people that you know really well know everything about you, but it's the people that know you a little bit that are going to end up giving you the opportunities to meet other people and end up being so critical. So that's one of my powers of Co, is that you end up having and really work at those weaker or bridging connections and make sure that you whether they be on LinkedIn or Facebook, whether you have a call list and you call them. One of the things that I do every Sunday night or Monday morning is I put together a call list of the people that I haven't talked to for a while that I want to reach out and touch. And one of the examples I use is, I think, one of the most successful prime ministers in the past, Brian Mulroney. Every weekend he would put together a call list of like 50 people, and then all week when he had a hole in his schedule, he'd call someone up and he'd wish them a happy birthday, he'd ask how they were doing, he'd ask about their parents, and he just established that personal rapport and the personal connection with people. And you know as well as I how many people that have just forgotten about that personal connection and don't reach out and touch someone. And so I think that's key.
That's huge. Yes, definitely. I believe, like, nowadays, especially in this era, everything seems to be very everything is texting. Meanwhile, when you do the networking connection, you actually face-to-face, you get that real connection, not the materialistic connection, right? So
well, 80% of communication comes from visual. It doesn't come from what we talk, and so therefore the visual is so critically important. And one of the best examples that I can give you is think about, how emoticons have taken off, right? And so, and why? It's because we want to show emotion, even when we're texting or putting a message in Facebook. And so therefore, you put those emoticons on because the words themselves don't actually convey what you feel and don't convey. And so you add in a GIF or an emoticon or something as a way of talking. And then, my kids, maybe not my generation, but my kids' generation, they go crazy with Snapchat and Instagram things. Why? It's because there you've got the video. Do. You've got something where you actually are getting face to face.
See it, yeah. You
and
can see it.
When I was growing up, the thing that we watched all the time was Star Trek and the what was it called? The transcorder, right? Which is the flip phone where you could actually see people. And people said, "Oh, that's crazy. That's never going to happen." Well, FaceTime.
That's what it is, except you don't flip it. It's right there, right?
Exactly. But so I think that it's interesting because cell phones and texting, I believe, is going to go away, and it's going to be replaced by video connection. So you're going to be texting a short video, or you're going to be FaceTiming people all the time. So as we get to higher and higher bandwidth and 5G and systems where we don't get charged as much for data, you're not going to send a text anymore. You're going to send a quick something or other. And I know lots of people that don't even text anymore. What they do is they're dictaphoning into the text, right? So the fact that they actually have to take the dictaphone and convert it, transcribe it into a text seems a little bit crazy. You're just going to send the message.
I see. Good stuff. So now let's talk about besides the events. What you actually do, your business.
So I have my own business, Crombie Capital Partners, and you can check it all out by going to www.crombiecapitalpartners.com or www.briancrombie.com. And what I do is merchant banking. So what I do is, the way I've described it often is, I do a lot of the things that you think a real estate agent does, and a mortgage broker does for a house, but for a business. So I will buy and sell companies, I'll finance companies, I'll do strategic planning, sort of the person that comes in and fixes out the house before you sell it. Well, I do that with a company. I'll do strategic planning for a company, I'll put together a business plan, I'll do due diligence for people that want to buy companies. So I do all that kind of stuff for companies, and in that regard, I'm Chief Financial Officer of about 4 different companies right now, and I enjoy it. It's a great way to get to know the companies, get involved in the companies, and help them through some major issues that they've got.
Great. So should anyone have interest in buying a business, then they should call Brian.
No question.
And your phone number, Brian?
I'm not going to give out my phone number, but you can certainly contact me through my website, briancrombie.com or crombiecapitalpartners.com.
Do you have an email?
I do. briancrombie@rogers.com.
Great. Okay. And you also do something else besides the Capital Crombie? The one you just mentioned, you do something else.
What else?
Would be with the NHL.
So through Crombie Capital Partners, I'm Chief Financial Officer of an NHL hockey team right now.
So how would that work? Like, how do you work with that? Like, what do you do there?
So Chief Financial Officer is responsible for financing the company. I've got a fairly substantial real estate development opportunity that I've been working on. And then, everything else a financial officer would do. Paying people and checking the accounts receivable, checking the accounts payable, reviewing the financial statements, and interacting with management on the management team. So it's a fun, pretty all-encompassing job.
So can you provide us a little bit of your vision within everything that you hold to date?
Vision about what?
Like vision of what you stand for in your product and what you present.
Well, from
the business.
From a business standpoint, I'm typically a chief financial officer for a growth-oriented company, and so therefore I firmly believe that what one needs to do is have a vision for that company, having that vision parlay itself into a strategic plan, and the strategic plan that you then have tactics that are all about, and that you have a good financing structure that allows you to execute that plan. So I'm a firm believer, whether it be personal or in company, that what you need to do is start with a vision, that then creates a strategy, that then creates the tactics, that then creates the financing plan on how you're actually going to achieve that. And so that's what typically companies will hire me to work on.
Okay, so companies would hire you to do that
Yes.
type of job. Okay, so now if someone has, let's say someone has a vision with getting a business, but then they have some issues within the financial, would you be able to help them?
Sure. So you know one of my clients because you modeled for them.
Yes.
And so therefore this is a company that's got a fascinating potential strategy and a vision, but they need some help executing it. So therefore someone like that would hire someone like me to take a look at their business and take a look at the vision, see if their vision is achievable or not, and then are the strategies that they're pursuing the right strategies to achieve that vision, and then are the things that they're doing to achieve those strategies the right things, and then probably help them. And then often, the vast majority of companies don't have enough money, don't have the right access to banks or investors or partners or licensees or licensors or whatnot, and I'll try to help them in that regard. So that's what I do, is I take companies like the company that you know and try to give it more of a business structure and a little bit of a push up the hill.
So basically like a business optimization kind of thing?
Sure.
Would that be the ideal? Like
Yeah, no,
you basically
so
review...
optimization would be typically thought of more like take what they've got and make it more efficient.
Okay.
So that, yes, I would work on, but more importantly, it's taking an idea that is a great idea, but making it more attainable by putting the structure in it. So, I'll give you an example for a person. Someone can have a vision of, I want to, be thinner, right? Well, so I don't think you can just have a vision of being thinner. What you got to do is you got to have a strategy of, I'm going to work out, I'm going to diet, I'm going to do this thing, and then the tactics are, well, I'm going to work out 3 times a week, and I'm going to diet by following a XYZ diet, and so what I'm doing is I'm taking someone that's got a vision of, I want to sell roses or whatever it happens to be around the world, and taking that and making it implementable and achievable by breaking it down into the specific strategies that you're following, and then the tactics on how you do it, and then very importantly, how I'm going to finance that. Because I think the way that we get things done, whether it's buying a house or living our lives or running a company, is by making sure that we got the money to achieve that. And so therefore, I can't tell you how many people, this radio station is one example, don't, I'm not saying that they're not, but you've got to make sure that you make money. And so, I think whether it's an artist or a model or a radio station or a rose company or whatnot, making sure that you got the right financial structure and getting the right financing is probably one of the key things that you've got to do to achieve your success.
So now let's say they do have the idea and the plan, right? But however their budget doesn't seem to go according to the plan, then you would be the person to advise them that, this is the reason why it's not going to happen, or you will actually help them to whatever it is to make it happen.
Yeah, so maybe they don't have enough money, or they're stretching themselves too wide because they're trying to do it with just the money that they've got. I work with a cosmetics company that I use as an example to the people that you know of, and this cosmetics company did a great job of expanding in Canada, but then had an opportunity to go to the United States. And when they went to the United States, it was a great opportunity. They got coverage across the whole United States, but it cost them a ton of money to buy the extra inventory. And then they had a little bit of a hiccup, it didn't work, and all that inventory came flooding back, and that bankrupted the company. And so therefore, you've got to think about growth and staging that growth over time in the right way and making sure that you got the financial wherewithal to grow it, and you don't over-lever yourself, as this one company I use as an example did when they went to the United States. And you could use that example in personal life. So I want to buy a bigger home. Well, so I've got a certain amount of debt against my current home, and then I really want a mansion. Do I max up with that same amount of percentage debt in the mansion? Well, that might put me over the top, and I end up not doing well and having financial problems. So you got to make sure that you've got the financial capability that matches the size of your company and the strategy that you're executing.
And the vision that you hold.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. If I want to be the #1 rose company in Toronto versus the #1 rose company in Canada versus the #1 rose company in the world, clearly those are 3 different visions that have dramatically different strategies
I like that
and
idea.
money associated with them.
Yes. So obviously the bigger the competitor, or the region, right? Because like Ontario and Canada and whatever it is, that all the topics you mentioned, then that means that you would need more investment and more money involved.
No question.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Well, we're gonna go for a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Did you share? I don't think it's shared. Let's see. Is it shared? Oh, you can share. DJ. So I was going to ask you about the
So you're chairman of Transit Alliance. What are your ideas on transit?
do you also think like you don't know with the transit programs, things like that? Are you involved with that?
And we are back. So, audience, should you have any questions for Brian, he would be more than happy to answer any questions. So, Brian, my question would be, since you did briefly mention earlier about your topics and where you work, I have an interest in regards to the transit.
Okay.
How much of an involvement you have with that, and also do you get involved with the projects within the transit city?
So I'm chair of something called Transit Alliance, which is a civic organization that tries to spur transit investment across the GTA. In that regard, as I said earlier, we have dinners, we have seminars, we have workshops and things like that. But what I've also been doing is I've been out doing a bunch of speeches around the Greater Toronto area on what I call transformational transit for Toronto. And I talk and try to get people excited about making sure that the public stays supportive of significant transit investment. And it's interesting because if you take a look at London, England, is a city where people will think we have really good transit. London, England didn't invest anything in transit from World War II until 1989. And then all the things that we think about that are spectacular that have been invested of late have been 89 and on. And what got it going was two things. Number one, it was a Canadian company, Olympia in York, and Canary Wharf, that was the spur to transit investment there, and people. The civic people in London, England, really got behind transit investment and forced the politicians and forced the governments to get behind transit. And we've got that opportunity now. And you think about what we've done from a transit. Up until recently, the amount of transit investment that we had was pretty dismal. We extended the Bloor subway from Islington to Kipling, one whole subway stop. We added 3 stops in a elevated LRT in Scarborough, and we filled in the subway station that is in Eglinton, that the Eglinton Crosstown's going through. So pretty dismal transit investment. But the last couple of years, we've dramatically increased our transit investment. And I'll give you a couple examples, if I could, about, I think, things that are transformational. So Regional Express Rail, which is taking the GO trains and turning the GO trains from just really morning and evening commuter rails into almost surface subways by having service every 15 or maybe even every 7 minutes, both ways, all day long. can change things. So, just down the street here in Scarborough is the Eglinton GO train station. Right now, there are trains every half hour all day long from there to Union Station, right? And it's probably less than half an hour, maybe 25, 28 minutes from here to Union Station. If you had that every 7 minutes, like you do at Yonge and Sheppard and Yonge and Eglinton, the development that would take place here would be dramatic, because all of a sudden people would say, I can live here and get downtown or get all over the place with no problems, no hassles. Same thing in Mississauga, at Dixie and Dundas, or at Hurontario and Dundas. So turning the GO trains into Regional Express Rail, RER. And a lot of people that have traveled, they've been to France, for an example. Mm-hmm. And in France, you have a metro system, which is the subways, and then you have what they call the RER, which is the same thing.
Which in Quebec, that's what they call it as well, the metro.
Right,
yeah.
Right. But then on top, and Montreal is doing the same thing. Montreal is building a RER type system on an old freight rail and passenger rail system from downtown Montreal out to the airport. And so what you're doing is you're building cheaper to build infrastructure, because you're using old freight and passenger railway to build something that's like a surface subway. And it's spectacular. I'll give you one other example. So people have been talking about a downtown relief line. A downtown relief line, there would be a subway that would take traffic off of the Bloor subway down to Union Station from Lake Pate, would probably cost $8 billion. It's an outrageously high amount of money.
Wow.
At the Broadview station, just below the Broadview subway station, is, guess what? A rail line. A rail line that is owned by the province of Ontario, by Metrolinx, that goes straight to the Union Station, okay? And it's, yes, down the ravine from the station, but it's half of the distance from the Broadview station down to the bottom of the ravine where the railway tracks is, than the King's Cross subway in London, England. So people say, oh, it's a long way. Well, yes, it is, but escalators or elevators can get you down there. It would be about the same distance as the elevators that take you through the tunnel that go to the Toronto Island for the new Island Airport tunnels and the passageway. And the other interesting thing, there's 4 trains that come in from the west and only 3 trains that go out to the east. So you think about Union Station, you've got the Barrie, you've got the Georgetown, you got the Milton, and you got the Lakeshore West.
Yeah. 4
trains that come in. But going out to the east, you've only got 3 trains. You got the Richmond Hill, you got the Uxbridge, and you've got the Lakeshore East. So you've got 1 train in rush hour 15 minutes, and in non-rush hour every half an hour or whatever, that's coming in that's not doing anything. Why don't we just take it up to Broadview, fill it up with a whole bunch of people that take an escalator down there, and take it down to Union Station? You would be downtown at Union Station in 10 minutes versus about 20, 25 minutes taking the subway to Bloor Danforth and then having to go. And you could do that at Maine. You could do that at Dundas West. So the GO trains, once they turn to very frequent travel, and you've got convertibility, transferability of the fare box, could end up saving us all the money for a downtown relief line. Could be implemented far quicker. Actually, are kind of nice because you're in a train outside rather than in a tunnel below the ground, and are running on existing freight rail or passenger rail systems, so they're a lot cheaper, quicker to get going, have already got the environmental approval. So that's one of the things that I've been doing. And by the way, that same railway station that I was talking about, that rail line, goes all the way up to Oriole Parkway, where it connects up potentially with the Sheppard line. So you could have a bypass for the Sheppard line that brings people down.
So there was actually one, is it related to the one on Pearson Airport? Like there's one similar to what you're saying, that actually it's not underground, it's above.
Yeah, so
and it goes all around.
So that's the new United Pearson Express, the UPX, and yes, it's elevated, and it's a great way to get downtown. One of the biggest challenges that we have from an employment standpoint and transit is the second largest employment zone in all of Canada is the Toronto Airport Corridor. So the Toronto Airport corporate community is bigger than Montreal. It's bigger than Vancouver from an employment standpoint. It's only second to downtown Toronto in its size. And it's got no transit. You think about, there's 35% or something like that of the people that come into the downtown financial district area that come by way of transit. They come by way of subways, they come by way of GO trains. The amount of people that get into the airport corporate zone by transit is less than 10%. Okay? And if you go to major cities around the world, if you have 2 different employment zones in major cities, and they work, you got to have, number one, transit for both of them, and number two, you got to have transit connections. And so Battery Park has got transit connections. Canary Wharf has got transit connections. La Défense in Paris. La Défense is the new office complex out to the west that's right on an RER and right on a metro. So, example after example I can give you. Think about New York. If you want to get to New Jersey, if you want to get to Brooklyn, you can get there by way of transit. We have not got that in Toronto. So what's the solution? Well, one solution would be to take that UPX Express that gets to Terminal 1, take it down one more station to the south. Guess where it'd be? It'd be in the airport corporate zone. Another solution would be to potentially, there's little connectivity north-south other than on the Yonge Street line, right? Mm-hmm. And as you know, we're building this Huron-Ontario LRT in Mississauga, or the province is building the Huron-Ontario LRT in Mississauga. There is an abandoned railway line, or at least a very lowly used railway line, that goes from the Long Branch GO up the middle of Etobicoke, ending at the Kipling subway station, GO train station. So half of the way up to the airport, there's already a train track that's unused, that connects with the GO at one end and a different GO and a subway at the other end. And guess what's on the other side of the Kipling GO train station? There's a hydro corridor that goes all the way from the Kipling GO train station all the way to the Pearson Airport. What's the second cheapest way of implementing new transit? The first is on existing railway. The second cheapest is through a hydro corridor. You could actually have, whether it be a GO train or an LRT or just a BRT, that goes from Long Branch to the airport like that. And that would be, I think, a spectacular way to get people. And interesting enough, do you know what is the highest bus used line in Toronto?
No,
and one of the cheapest ways to get to the airport? The Airport Rocket, which goes from the Kipling subway station to the airport. So there's a whole bunch of people that want to get to the airport by way of transit, but what do? They go to Kipling and they get on a bus. And they take the bus up to 427. So why don't we give them an LRT or an elevated LRT or a GO train that takes them all the way right there, and at the same time provides incredibly good service to the airport corporate zone.
Because we haven't reached there. We gotta get it. Yeah. So is that in the works, or is that something? No.
Just one of those ideas. I'll give you one more. So one of the things that's being built right now in London, England, they're building something called the Crossrail, which is a railway that goes right across London. Because what they found is that you could get around London, but you couldn't get across it. So
okay.
So I was in Ottawa today. I landed at Pearson Airport. I put in my what do you call it? GPS, apologies.
If I don't use it, I would not.
To get here in Scarborough, you know what my GPS said? An hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
An hour and a half to get across the city. And so if someone invites me, if you had invited me for 6:30 or 7, I would have said no way.
It's not
right?
happening.
If friends of mine in Scarborough invite me for dinner, I say, I'll come for dessert, but I'm not going to come for dinner because it takes too long to get across the city. Well, guess what we've got that goes right across the city?
What do we got?
A railway line. So we've got a railway line. So all the freight for Canadian Pacific goes through Milton, goes through Mississauga, goes through Kipling, goes right between Casa Loma and Summerhill LCBO, up by the Science Centre, out through Scarborough, out to the east. It's an old railway line. The LCBO that's at the Summerhill and Yonge Street, that was the main passenger railway station for Canadian Pacific before they moved to Union Station. So if we got that if we got the freight traffic out of Toronto, because the freight traffic shouldn't be in Toronto. We've got oil, we've got dangerous goods, we've got the Lake Megantic train, the train that derailed in Lake Megantic, that they're building a bypass around Lake Megantic for. The federal government is financing a bypass around Lake Megantic because of the damage. Guess where that train went through? The middle of Toronto. What would have happened?
Wow.
What would have happened?
Goods?
What would happen if we had that kind of a spill in Toronto? We would be demanding that we do a bypass. So the right thing to do is get the freight traffic out of the middle of Toronto. Well, if you do that, what have you opened up? You've opened up a beautiful surface subway, GO train, RER, whatever you want to call it, that would go, think about it, from Mississauga to Kipling, to Casa Loma, to Summerhill, to the Science Centre, to the Toronto Zoo. You could extend it out to Peterborough. It would be a quick way of getting across. And so therefore, and I could come straight to this Eglinton GO train station from Mississauga in minutes.
In minutes.
That's the kind of transit that we need to have. It would be effectively the equivalent of the 401 is for cars, but it would be for passengers in the middle of the city by way of train. A bypass across the city.
Yeah. And then also now before, let's say that was available, then people would have to basically leave their cars wherever the station they got on, right? and pay for that parking and then get in and then get to their destination, just like the way they do it right now.
Sure, and you probably know the usage of cars is going down dramatically. And people say, oh, you're going to take away your cars, and I don't get away.
Well, the gas is going...
No question. But for transit to work, to alleviate the traffic and congestion on highways, you only need 15 to 20% of the people to use transit. So the vast majority of people are still going to use the cars. And you probably remember at the Pan Am Games. The Pan Am Games, everyone was worried that we were going to have this massive problem. And what we did is we put in high occupancy lanes and, you had to have permits and things like that.
I do remember the lane for like 2 people only, or the bus.
All that happened is car usage went down about 20%. When car usage went down by 20% because of all the things they did, you end up having a lot more room. And you know that. So the freeways are just too overcrowded. So we got to get some of the people off of the freeways onto to rail. But the interesting thing is millennials are making that choice anyway. The car usage is going down. Shared car usage is going up. People are delaying when they get their licenses. They're delaying when they buy cars. They're using Ubers or Zip cars or whatnot. And they're moving downtown, or they're moving to Yonge and Eglinton or Yonge and Shepherd, or places where they can get on transit and never even have to use and own a car. There's a big building that's been built right now at Yonge and Bloor, and it was one of the first buildings that was approved for zoning with minimal parking. Up until then, they'd always demanded that you have all this parking. And the reason why they got that approval is because they said, we're going to appeal to people that don't own cars. If you're at Yonge and Bloor, you don't need to own a car, maybe on the weekend. And think about examples. Manhattan, car ownership in Manhattan is one of the lowest car ownership cities in the world.
Oh,
Why?
Really?
Because you go everywhere by transit. And if you don't have the transit, you'll take a cab. And that's what's going to happen more and more in downtown Toronto.
Well, but Uber is car, so it's still, I know it's a less person that will be driving, but it's still like the taxi, Uber, all those are like...
Sure, and so I think that it matches together, because the biggest challenge that transit authorities have is your problem of that last mile. So it's how do you get from the parking lot at the GO train at the Eglinton here home, right?
That's right.
And so therefore they end up trying to create either huge parking lots so people can drive to them, or they try to create development right beside it so people can walk to it. Well, Uber might be one of the best solutions, like shared ownership, right? Like if I could grab an Uber and for a couple of bucks get from my house to the local GO train station and then get on the GO and come down downtown, and then the same thing. Number one, I wouldn't need a car. Number two, I wouldn't need to park. Number three, I'd get there far quicker and I wouldn't get wet walking from the stupid parking lot that's half a mile away from the GO train station. So Uber or shared vehicles like that are actually a really good solution for the last mile.
Or even carpool.
Yeah. Well, I think Uber is they've got their carpools there too.
Yeah. Good.
Anyway, so that's one of the things I do from a volunteer standpoint, chair of Transit Alliance, and you can check it out by transitalliance.com, or you can follow us at Unlock Gridlock on Twitter. And we have interesting seminars and workshops and dinners once a month, and we really, I think, do a reasonably good job of spurring transit investment and knowledge and excitement about transit and how transit can change. And one of the lines that we've used that I kind of like is that really good transit could put the great back in the Greater Toronto Area.
Wow, that's amazing. Good job, Brian. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, let's... I wanted to also focus on, you also do, I guess, motivational speaking for fashion events or any other events. So when you're asked to do that, how do you feel about that?
I love it. I think that's how we met at
the International Women's Day. Yes.
And I wouldn't describe it as motivational speaking, but what I do is I'm applying some of the ideas and tenets of this thesis that I'm doing on social capital to everyday lived experience. And so I had a really interesting opportunity last Thursday. I was asked to be the speaker at a launch of a bespoke fashion line. And frankly, I didn't even know what the word bespoke meant. And so I ended up having to do a little bit of work and understanding what customization and things that are not off the rack but made to measure just for you meant. And it's fascinating because it's a massive trend that's taken place where people are going away from wearing the exact same things like we did maybe a generation ago, where businessmen in the 1950s were called the men in the gray flannel suit because everyone wore the exact same suit, the exact same white shirt, the exact same tie, to today where everyone has almost a very unique look and are doing things to be unique. And that's where the word bespoke. And it's interesting, you may know this, but the word bespoke, which means customization, comes from the verb bespoken. And bespoken means saying something. And so when you think about it, well, that's what clothes and fashion really are doing. They're saying something. They're saying something about you,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And so, what is my suit, my tie trying to say about me? It's trying to say something about what I do and how I want to be perceived. And if I showed up in shorts and a t-shirt, what would that have shown, me to be saying with my clothes? Or if I had a baseball cap on backwards and my underwear showing above my jeans. Right? So the way that you
how do I
dress
want to be
yourself
perceived,
says something about who you are. And so that's the idea of bespoken, which is the noun bespoke. Anyway, so I go through that, and it really has a lot to do with I think image and brand and confidence. If you're going to be confident and that's one of my powers of co-words, my 10 powers of co-words. I think what you need to do is you need to have a brand image and a brand statement. And I think that if you don't have a brand image, think about a company and a product. If a product doesn't have a brand statement and a brand image, it's not going to be successful. If this radio station doesn't have a brand statement, it's not going to end up being successful. Well, the person is about the same. You got to have a brand statement. Like, you're a coach, a life coach. You're a model, and you're now a radio broadcaster interviewer. Right? So you come up with a brand statement in that regards about being a dynamic radio broadcaster, model, and career coach or something. The type of person that you want to be, and I think that's key. One of the examples I use is, a real estate agent that says I sell houses is a transactionally oriented real estate agent. All they want to do is make their fee. But a real estate agent that says they find families homes, right? Mm-hmm. Very different, because what they're doing is they're saying, I'm going to find a family, not a house, but a home, a place where they'll be happy and they'll stay a while. Well, that person is worried more about the customer and making the customer happy and the customer's family happy than they are about earning their fee. So a little change in a brand statement from I sell houses to I find families homes changes your whole orientation about who you're trying to serve and what you're trying to achieve, whether you're serving yourself or whether you're serving your client. And I go through a whole bunch of different examples of brand statements like that, and I make people work on it, and then I get them to assess the way they look, the way they act, their social media, their advertising, and is it consistent with their brand statement, right? Like if you showed up here in a I don't know what I should use as
rock star.
It wouldn't be consistent with being a life coach.
Life coach, yes.
Right? And so what is a life coach, dress like? And how do you present yourself? So I think those are key things that you got to do. And so when I spoke at the fashion show, that's what I was speaking about. When I was speaking at the International Women's Day, I was speaking on the importance of diversity and inclusion. And one of the lines that I love to use is diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. So the fact that we're male and female, that's a fact. But if you actually have females in the workforce, on the board of directors, in your associations, in leadership roles, that's a choice. Same thing with different races, different religions. It's a fact that Toronto is very diverse. But do we actually include everyone? Do people of color, do people that are of different religions, do they actually have the representation on city council, on the provincial legislature, in boards, in C-suite positions? And if they don't, do those organizations really reflect the population of Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area? And frankly, I don't think they do right now. And so therefore, we have diversity, but we haven't actually found the strength of diversity and made it inclusion. And so I think that that's an interesting thing. And it comes back to diversity exists, but until we actually decide to celebrate it, make use of it, and include those people in our daily life, do we not get the inclusion?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you another example.
Makes sense. Well, we do have diversity everywhere, right? Canada itself is very international, and we do work with many different individuals. And diversity is everywhere. It's one of the high. But
are we inclusive? So you say diversity, but do we actually, when you go to a church, when you go to a board meeting, when you go to an association meeting, do you have, and I got to tell you, I'm very involved, or at least I have been in the past, very involved in
I know you do.
sort of, different things in Toronto or Mississauga. And I'll go to one event, it'll be all Muslim. I'll go to another event, it'll be all Sikh. I go to another event, it'll be all white.
Yeah,
Not often enough.
I was on an event not too long ago, and I'm not Muslim, but I was there, and so are you.
Yeah.
So there you go, diversity.
And so that, I think the Mississauga Arts Council, is doing a very good job of ensuring that we are inclusive. I think that the International Women's Day event that you were at was very inclusive, and they did a good job
Yes.
of nominating females from lots of different groups. And one of the interesting things about that is that the females from different groups got to know, meet, and celebrate people that were getting awards in different areas. And I think that's wonderful. And we don't do enough of that. We should do more of it. Last night was an interfaith iftar dinner at Celebration Square in Mississauga. And probably the vast majority of people were Muslim, but there were a lot of people that weren't Muslim that were there to experience.
You went yesterday.
To experience the breaking of the fast.
Yes.
And that's sort of as important to Muslims as Christmas is to Christians, right? And so I would love it if some of my Muslim friends would come to a Christmas party and Christmas Eve service or something like that. Well, it's wonderful to be actually at an iftar event.
Yes.
Just like it would be wonderful to be at a
I understand
Festival
your
of
point.
Lights event for Hindu people.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from now. Yes. I guess we seem to be more acceptant and be more, available to actually go and explore, right? Certain type of cultures. But I find some others are not as much towards other ones, and I think that's what you stated earlier.
Societies go through 3 stages of adapting to accepting different cultures. The first is tolerate. Actually, the first would be not tolerate, but the first positive is tolerate. When you think about tolerate, means I'm just putting up with people that are different than me. The next is engagement. So you actually engage them in your clubs, your organizations, whatever. And the third is celebrate. You're actually happy and you celebrate the fact that you're a more diverse society. And you think about Toronto, and lots of people have written about this. Toronto in the 1950s was a boring place. You got overdone steak and mashed potatoes and boiled carrots. That was what you ate at every restaurant in Toronto in the 1950s. It was pretty boring. Toronto today is spectacular. We went out for sushi just before we came here tonight, right? Like fantastic Japanese food. You could go out around here and have any one of a number of different menus tonight. That's one of the things that makes our eating rich. Well, we're doing more of that from a music standpoint. Probably not as much as we should, where we tend to just go back to our own cultural music. But there's great music from a whole bunch of different cultures. And what about different churches? What about different religions? One of the things that I've had the privilege of doing is going to mosques and gurdwaras and synagogues and churches, and it's a wonderful experience. And I've gone to black gospel churches and that are rocking and having fun, and I've gone to some of the most staid conservative Anglican churches. And that diversity within the Christian faith is fascinating. And going to all of them and experiencing all of them is wonderful.
So, and experiencing them didn't mean that you have converted to them, right? Because I have some friends and they tell me sometimes, you shouldn't go to those things because then you're gonna convert yourself and all that. And I find that it's so fascinating actually experiencing something that you don't. It's basically like I don't need to go to China in order to experience the Buddha and all that, right? And as well India and all these fantastic places. You have everything here in Toronto, in Canada, right? So for me, it's like I love it, but I do not have to change anything about.
Well, I'll give you one example. The Aga Khan Museum. Have you gone there?
No.
So the Aga Khan Museum is Eglinton and the Don Valley Parkway. Okay, it is one of the most impressive museums you'll ever go to. I urge you to go. Well, it's a Ismaili, I think that's right, is not an Ismaili Muslim museum, but it's fantastic. It's beautiful, and it's got unbelievably interesting art and artifacts in it, and an incredible garden. Well, it's one of those things that you should experience, and it's right here. From a thought-provoking standpoint, the Holocaust Museum that's in Besedek Synagogue, it's jarring. You can't see it without being bothered, and that's why it's helpful to understand. So, some of our different religious faiths have incredibly powerful facilities within our city that are beautiful. The St. James Cathedral on Sunday afternoons has evensong at 4 or whatever o'clock in the afternoon. It's beautiful. St. Michael's Cathedral has the boys' choir. It's incredible. So, we've got such a wealth of very diverse religious, cultural, racial, music, restaurants, performance, etc. Get out there and enjoy it.
Yeah, you got it. Get out there and enjoy it, everyone. Good job, Brian. Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap it up for today. However, once again, I want to say thank you, Brian, for
My pleasure.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also, should you need anything, Brian is here to help you. Once again, Brian, can you share just the website and the email?
Sure. CrombieCapitalPartners.com or BrianCrombie.com.
Okay. And however, the other good news I have is that that information will be posting and available on FREQUENCY5FM. Because Brian has just, advised that he will be sponsoring my show. So we have a big applause. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. And everybody, do not forget, every Wednesday, Carla Paiva Life Coach from 8 to 9 p.m. Thank you and have a great night.